I'm Viviana Brun. I'm the digital strategist of ONG 2.0. And I'm so glad today to be here and to welcome you to this webinar with Patrick Meier about the use of drones in the humanitarian development sector. As you can see, Patrick is already connected with us. So hello, Patrick. Thank you and welcome.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Viviana. Really great to be here.
Okay, I'll just give you some information before starting the webinar. I just want to introduce you who we are, what are we doing. I know that maybe you already know us because you are here today, but maybe you are not aware about all the latest activities we are managing, especially for English-speaking people. Because it's true, ONG 2.0 is based in Italy, as you can see from my bad English accent, but we are mainly working online, so in the web. We are an app and training center about the use of ICT and on the web, especially for further the humanitarian aid sector and international cooperation sector. For English people, we are managing two mainly activities. The first one is online long-term training course that is now at the end. The training course is called ICT Innovation for Development. We have 25 people. They are participating in this course. They are almost in the end, and they are working. They are going to work in the next weeks on some projects, real projects from coming from NGO, Italian NGO that are doing this activity in field, and they will analyze how to introduce some technology, some ICT in the projects, when the technology could be useful to the project and when it's not useful and it's better to go on in a more traditional way. So they will be really in charge to develop a real project. I know that many participants are connected today, so I just want to say hello to all them and to thank you for being here with us. I think that this webinar could be really interesting for them. And the second activity is in preview because we are going to launch this activity. This is a grant, and especially is about two different grants dedicated to local innovators. We are going to launch this grant on the 1st of March. So so it's just for giving you an idea of what are the activities that are going to start in the next weeks. And so if you are a local innovator, so if you are already working in field with the technology for facing some problem within your community, you will find all the information from the 1st of March on this page. And you will see you have the possibility to download the guidelines, and so there you will find all the information you need to apply for the grant. And before starting, I will give you also some information about this platform we are using, that is our GoToWebinar. I don't know if maybe someone of you is new to webinar. So you have the possibility. I will show you here. I think this is what you can see on the top right of your screen. You have the possibility to raise your hand here, asking for a question, for doing some question to Patrick. So you have the possibility to directly interact with Patrick, or if you prefer, you have the possibility to ask question, to write your question here. And there is my colleague, Erika, that is helping me, and she will answer you to all the technical issues you can have in following the webinar. For example, I cannot hear about the video recordings. So you can write down all your questions, the technical issues or the question to Patrick. You can write your question at any time. You don't have to wait for Patrick to stop or to some specific question time. because we will collect all the questions, and then at the question time we will just read the question to Patrick and let him the time to answer. So I think it's all from my side. As you can see, maybe Patrick will give you more information. We are following the job of Patrick since many years, reading his blog, iRevolutions, following all the activity that We Robotics is managing in the world. Patrick is an international recognized expert in the use of ICTs for especially in humanitarian sector. There is a really interesting book that I have with me, and so I really enjoy it, and this is why I present to you. That is Digital Humanitarians, but maybe is the time to give you the floor, Patrick, and to let you do your presentation. I give you the possibility to share your screen.
Yep. Okay. Hopefully you see it.
Yes, it's fine.
Perfect. So my slides are up?
Yes, it's perfect. We Robotics.
All righty. Thank you so much, Viviana. Really, really great to be here. I've been looking forward to this presentation, and very much looking forward to the discussions that are going to happen. You know, there are a lot of questions in the humanitarian technology space, and I certainly don't have anywhere close to most of the answers. So I really enjoy these webinar opportunities because I get to ask for advice as well. So I hope for all of you who are attending now, who may be viewing the recording later on, this is really an open invitation to get in touch with me at any time, share your questions at any time, not just only today, but 6 months from now if you have a question or an idea or a suggestion, or 6 years from now. So really just an open invitation to continue the conversation throughout. So before I jump in, just to say, you know, I've been working in the humanitarian technology space for a good 10, 15 years now, and wrote a book on it and so on. That's been endorsed and supported by these different organizations. Now, what I'm going to do for this presentation is really just look at one narrow part of the humanitarian technology space. You know, of course, there are all kinds of technologies, mobile technologies. There are all kinds of methods and solutions and so on that are exciting. And one of them that I touched on in the book has to do with drones or aerial robotics. And that's what I'm going to focus in on today and share what we've learned and some of the questions that we still have. But of course, you know, humanitarian technology is much broader than just robotics. So to start with, here's a satellite image of central Nepal that was taken in April back in 2015, and about half an hour after this image was taken, a devastating 8.0 magnitude earthquake struck the country. And of course, as all of you are involved in development and humanitarian aid and so on, you'll know that the impact was really devastating in terms of lives lost and displaced and so on. And on top of all of that, you know, tragedy, the fact that Nepal remained cloudy for many days really made things even worse, because it meant that we weren't able to use satellite imagery to really help us assess relatively quickly just the extent and the severity of the damage. So for about a week, the pictures that we got from satellites were basically, you know, like this, and that proved really, really problematic. So later on, my team and I were actually able to, you know, go underneath the clouds here and use flying robots to start assessing the disaster damage. And we did this by the invitation of local partners and in collaboration with local partners. And of course, with drones, you're able to fly under the clouds and actually get very high resolution imagery. And you know, the reason I call these platforms robots is because they are robots, in the sense that you can actually program them to operate autonomously. And so I think the main point to take away in terms of robotics and the use of robotics in aid and development is not to just get too excited about the fact that these platforms fly, because what's the real excitement and the real disruption if you like, here, is that we're moving from a world that's characterized by manually controlled technologies. We're all used to controlling technologies manually, but we're moving increasingly to a world that's characterized by more intelligent and autonomous systems, and that's a very different world. But it's this kind of transition that offers huge opportunities for humanitarian aid and development, as well as, of course, presents a number of challenges. But so just to drive the point home, we did not fly these drones manually. That, again, would defeat the purpose of having these robotic solutions. Instead, we programmed all 10 of our platforms to fly and take pictures automatically. And while a few years ago that might have been a bit more challenging, it's frankly a lot easier today. It's if you have a smartphone or a tablet, it's basically as easy as drawing this green rectangle over the area that you want to survey, and then basically pressing go. And the drone takes off and flies automatically, snaps the pictures, lands automatically, and then you take the SD card out of the drone and you put it in your laptop and you download the pictures. And you use software that's also available for free to stitch all the pictures together. Now, we did this directly in partnership with the Community Disaster Management Committee, because they were the ones who came to us and said, we really, really need high resolution imagery to help us inform our recovery and reconstruction efforts, especially in this area called Panga that had been quite severely hit by the earthquake. Now, we had spent a full day flying and capturing all the imagery that we needed. And as we were making our way back to the van to get back to the university that night, the head of the local committee, came up to me somewhat nervously and, said, you're going to be coming back tomorrow, yes? And frankly, we had only planned for one day. We didn't realize, and we only had one day really, and we didn't realize that we was going to need more. And so that really kind of threw up the whole schedule into free fall and complicated things. But it was the best possible complication that you can ask for, because if your local partner and your local team basically says, we need more of this, please come back, then I think you know that you're probably doing something right. You know that you're probably in the right place at the right time. So I changed my flight rescheduled my flight from Kathmandu, stayed on longer. We spent a whole extra day in Panga, literally from sunrise to sunset, flying, and mapping nonstop. And the result was this very high resolution map, which is the product of hundreds and hundreds of small photographs that were taken by the drone. And like I said, you use the software to then stitch it all together like a puzzle. And by high resolution, I really mean high resolution. You can zoom in all the way down to this kind of street level to really assess the disaster damage from far closer than you might be able to. And if you compare this imagery with the satellite imagery that our local partners were using, my question to you is, which imagery would you rather have when you're planning your relief, response, reconstruction, and development efforts? Would you rather do this blindly, or would you rather have your glasses on and see more clearly in terms of the damage and the priority areas? So the other advantage of robotics and drones is that you can create these relatively high resolution 3D models of affected areas. And this is really important as well, because disaster damage is a 3D phenomenon. When you look at 2D, it's hard to interpret 2D on its own. You actually need training. And there's actually courses and graduate courses, university courses on how to do imagery interpretation, satellite imagery analysis, and so on. But if you can do this in 3D, and then you can import these 3D models into a virtual reality environment, then it's basically virtually as if you were right there in Kathmandu walking around the damaged areas. And you do not need training to recognize what disaster damage looks like in 3D, because we're all born and raised in a 3D world. It's very intuitive for us. So I think we're going to see this happen more and more, not necessarily tomorrow, but there's already some interesting projects and research development starting to happen in terms of how do you combine drone 3D models with virtual reality, specifically for humanitarian aid and development projects. Now, at the same time, we also have to take a reality check here. Not everybody has a VR. I don't have a VR headset. I don't know where I could borrow one. And our local partners and the local communities in Nepal with whom we work also don't have access to this technology. They don't have easy access to smartphones, tablets, or computers either. So we decided to find another way to try and take this digital data and unlock this data, to liberate this data from the hard drives and from the computers and make it directly accessible to our local partners and the local community. And to do this, we simply printed all our maps on these large rollable banners, which we then brought right back to the local community and invited the local community to respond, to comment, to discuss the disaster damage and different issues that they could see from this very high resolution map. And for me, this was really the highlight, the reason why we were there in the first place and why we do this as part of our work. It's when our local partners invited the community to have the community members themselves hack the map to help to have them annotate the map with their own local knowledge, and the participatory nature of the response was, you couldn't ask for more. I mean, it just made it so much more relevant, right? It's one thing to just have a base map, but a base map, even if it's developed by very cool robotics technologies, it's just a base map. It's what you do with it that ultimately matters. And so for many, many hours, you had hundreds of members of the local community who came together to discuss the map and add where they see damage, what the priority areas, and all this participatory mapping then generated a lot of debate and discussions around what the priorities are for reconstruction and redevelopment, what strategies should be used. And because this was done in a very open, participatory, transparent manner, it was very inclusive. It was very democratic. It meant that any special interests, and I don't want to suggest that there were in this particular case, but if the son of the local mayor could, as we know in other humanitarian development projects and so on, there's a lot of special interests. They'll say, oh yeah, no, you should be rebuilding this area because it happens to be my cousin's house, right? But because you're doing this in public in a way that's transparent, open, inclusive, and democratic, it does make it a lot more difficult for any kind of special interest to divert the humanitarian aid, to divert the funding for development, reconstruction, and so on. Now, this is all very positive, but it's not always that positive. There are always challenges, there are always failures and mistakes that happen. In our case, one of our failures was that we missed a really important part of the town of Panga, which apparently had a lot of the damage, but we just missed it. But on the plus side, because when we arrived in Nepal, the first thing we did during the first 3 days was train our local partners on how to use this technology safely, how to use it responsibly, how to use it effectively. Our local partners were able to go right back to Panga after we had left the country and get the job done, to actually finish the job the way it should have been done. And we only found out about this weeks and weeks after they had done it. They never even told us. It was just by accident when I spoke with them on the phone and said, okay, so what's new? And they happened to say, oh yeah, a few weeks ago, we went back to Panga and we finished the job. And this is a great story for me personally, because this is why I do what I do. It's really helping people help themselves with appropriate technologies that you can localize and enable local communities, local partners to take ownership of. So that's really the story. We have a very strong community engagement process for the work that we do in Nepal. So, this work was very much inspired by the earthquake, and the fact that at the time it happened, there was no strong capacity with a lot of drones to be used locally. It was international people coming in to do the surveys. But now, thanks to the work that we've continued to do at We Robotics, we have a We Robotics lab in Nepal. We call our labs flying labs, where we've already trained over 60 participants, students from the university, as well as NGO officials and humanitarian professionals, development professionals on how to use the technology. So we have a team, a Nepali team, running our Nepal flying labs. And that's really important. So our team here is run by Uttam, who you see in the red hat here. And this was just a few weeks ago in Nepal, where Uttam and team mapped, did a really, really challenging, very challenging and ambitious project. They mapped one of the largest landslides in the country. And the result here is you see in 3D. We just shared this very recently, and we've shared this with humanitarian partners that we worked with, and so on. And you can find a lot more about this project on our blog at We Robotics if you're interested. So before I jump to the work we're doing in Tanzania and then the work that we're doing in Peru, I thought I'd maybe pause for a few minutes just to see if there are any questions on the work that we've been doing in Nepal.
Okay, Patrick. There is a Fabio Ricci that raises hands. I don't know, Fabio, if you have some question. I can switch your microphone on. Fabio?
Oh, sorry, I did an error.
Okay, no problem. Okay. Okay, we don't have other questions. There are, for the moment, only technical issues. What I want to underline that it's really interesting the way you were able to involve the community. Sometimes it's quite hard, and I have a question. Okay, I saw that around the map there were people from, I don't know, the old ladies and children all together. Was it easier for them to read the map, because sometimes they are not used to this kind of tool?
That's a really great question. Thanks for asking. It's something I'm very passionate about. So it's a topic that's close to my heart. Before I answer that question, is just to say that if we had done this mapping, and if we had not printed out the maps, but we had maybe put the maps on a tablet and brought the tablet back to the local community, what would have happened is you would only had like 4 or 5 men from the community around the tablet, right? It would not be inclusive. And it's because we chose a very public space in Panga where everybody goes through, right? And we said, okay, here's where we're going to put the maps. And we stayed for half a day. That it made it far more accessible. Now, to answer your question, back in 2009, I was doing very similar work in the Sudan with UNDP, where we were working in post-conflict states in Eastern Sudan, and doing some community mapping as well. And there we would be bringing, maps and other things. And we did something similar in Liberia. And what was very interesting from what I took away from this experience, Sudan in 2009 and Liberia in 2011, I think it was that satellite imagery is not intuitive. I wrote actually a pretty big blog post on all the wrong assumptions that we often have in the development and aid space in terms of technology use. If you think about it, in hindsight, I feel very stupid, because there's nothing intuitive about satellite imagery. It's just because all of us here on this webinar have the luxury of having been born and raised at a time in countries where Google Earth has been around for 10 years, 12 years now. That satellite imagery is all about, oh yeah, where's my house on satellite imagery. It's not conceptually difficult for us, but we shouldn't take that for granted. There's nothing intuitive about looking at an area from a bird's eye view. And so what I found very interesting, to now answer your question in full about the work we did in Nepal, was because the aerial imagery was such high resolution, 3 to 4 centimeter resolution, because it was so detailed, it was far, far easier for everyone around to actually understand what they were seeing at. We didn't have to do anything. And in fact, was the first thing that started happening, and just reminded me of this anecdote, was you had people with their smartphone, their flip phones, who were going close to the map and taking a picture of the aerial map of their house, without us saying anything, where their house was, what this was about, blah, 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 right? So because you could see all the details, it was easier to interpret, to understand what you were looking at. It's not true, as I learned firsthand, when you use satellite imagery.
Okay, thank you. We have many questions now. Okay, I have many questions about the cost of this technology, and
yes.
For how much did it cost to do this training? And okay, start with this, and I go on reading the others.
Sure, absolutely. So the drones that you saw that we used, so we used different drones in Nepal. The ones that I showed you, the first ones I showed you, those are called the DJI Phantoms, and this is the model version 3, if you'd like. Now there's already version 4, right? It's like the iPhone. Now version 3 that we used in Nepal at the time cost about $1,200. It had just come out a few months earlier. It cost $1,200. That we got 10 of them. They were donated to us by DJI. So we have formal official partnerships with some of the leading drone companies, robotics companies in the world, which gives us access to their technology, sometimes for free, sometimes at a discount. Sometimes we get access to their very early prototypes that are not yet publicly available for us to use, and so on. But what's important to note is that this DJI Phantom 3 that cost $1,200 in 2015 now costs $300 or $400. And so the cost of these technologies are just every year, they're just going down and down and down and down. And you don't need the latest model. In fact, we're going to Tanzania tomorrow to continue building our Tanzania flying labs. And we had this discussion yesterday. Okay, we need some Phantoms for the flying labs there for what the team wants to do, the Tanzanian team wants to do. Should we buy the version 4 or should we buy version 3? Version 4 is more expensive, it can do more, but we don't need the more expensive, we don't need it to do more. Version 3 is perfectly fine. They said, yeah, okay, we'll just buy the $300-400 version 3, sorry. And we haven't touched version 4. Now with the other platform that I showed you that Utam was holding, the fixed wing, that black fixed wing, which only weighs 600-700 grams, that is quite a bit more expensive. That is $10,000. It is one of the best, most robust, most reliable drones on the entire market. It's a Swiss company called SenseFly. They've been around for many years. What attracts us a lot about that platform is that it is very, very light. It's 600-700 grams. It's very robust. It's been through so many versions already. The software is so much easier to use than other drones. It's just really, really incredibly reliable. But that doesn't mean that it's always perfect. With any kind of technology you have, whether it's drones, whether it's 3D printers, whether it's mobile phones, laptops, tablets, what have you, things do break. And one of the biggest challenges we have with these commercial drones, both the Phantom and the EB from SenseFly, is that when they break, it's often not very, if they break really badly, it's often not possible to fix them on site. You have to ship them back to Switzerland or to China to get them fixed. And that is not optimal, very, very, very not optimal. So as part of what we're doing with our flying labs, and we're starting this actually with Tanzania first, is making sure that our flying labs has a workshop repair space, and that we start training our flying labs teams locally on the most common repairs, and that we provide our flying labs teams with the spare parts and so on and so forth. At the end of the day, our goal is to be able to repair anything and everything locally within our labs. But that takes time. You have to train people. It's not something that happens very easily. In Peru, I'm going to talk about Peru in a bit, we're looking to maybe work with motorbike mechanics and others, because obviously they understand engineering and they understand mechanics very well. They're very practical. And so we're going to explore whether we might be able to train those engineers who already fix motorbikes and cars and so on, and help them develop new skills that they can actually then, have more jobs and more income to also be able to repair drones on site. So does that answer your question?
I think so. There is another question a little bit more that it's always talking about money and the cost. If you need to budget a day intervention, for example, more days independently from travel and hotel and meals, I think you already answered about the cost of the technology, really about the cost of drones. And I have another question from Collins. Beside earthquakes, were there any other areas to use the drone in?
Oh, very much so. That's great questions. I mean, just to say in terms of, so one of the, these are great questions. One of the reasons why we decided to create local flying labs is because, you know, flying in people from Europe and from the US halfway across the world to Nepal to fly drones is expensive. It takes a lot of time. It's difficult because of customs to bring in technology and so on and so forth, right? And it's expensive to then have these international teams to put them up at the fancy hotels, to pay for their car rentals and all that. It becomes very, very expensive. And that's why a number of people are saying, well, I mean, if you start comparing the costs of satellite imagery with all the costs involved in paying an international team, paying for their flights, their hotel, their car transportation, and their time, and so on, then you know it becomes quite a bit more expensive sometimes to get aerial imagery. And so what we want to do instead is say, no. There's no reason to fly people from halfway across the world. We can train professional Nepalis, professional Tanzanians and Peruvians who already live in the country, who know the language, who know the culture, who already have a house that they stay at. They don't need to take a plane, and not only is it then a lot cheaper because you're not paying for all these travel costs, but it's a lot faster as well. By definition, the first responders have always been the local communities, the local partners. It's never the team from Iceland that flies in 72 hours later. It's always the local. So if, by definition, the local partners and local communities are the first responders, why not empower the first responders, the local partners and communities with this technology so that they can be the first responders using this technology as well, and then be able to capture the imagery a lot faster to assess the damage so that we can start assisting much more quickly. So the costs really depend on how much it costs to rent a van or a car or a motorbike in Nepal, Tanzania, and Peru, which is very, very little, having worked in those three countries. And our Flying Labs teams are already employees of us, so they're doing this work regardless. So it then becomes so much faster to produce aerial imagery than to get satellite imagery, which can take days. You can do this now in a matter of hours at maximum, in some cases with drones, and you don't have to spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. So that was I think the answer to the first question. But what was the second question again? Sorry.
And I have another question about how relevant is the need for internet?
Oh, relevant for internet. Oh, and the other question was about earthquakes and so on. Yeah. So before, so the earthquake. Yes. So our partners in Peru have done projects with the drones that focus on environmental monitoring. Just last week, UTAM was teaming up with some other partners to fly along one of the biggest rivers of Nepal to do some water quality monitoring. I don't have all the information. This is really recent and new. But yes, just to say that our Flying Labs are not restricted to any kind of project. Our Flying Labs, they decide, so our Nepali, Tanzanian, and Peruvian teams decide what projects to focus on. And that can be multi-sectoral projects. It can be environmental, it can be humanitarian, it can be development, it can be public health. It's really them that decide what the priority projects are, what the major challenges are. And our role at We Robotics is then to provide them with the professional training and the relevant technology for that particular challenge so that they can then be the ones who implement it themselves on the ground. Internet connection, it really depends. It depends on whether you need to share the data very quickly with somebody else. We haven't done very sudden onset response where you had to share the data in like 12 to 24 hours. But if you have to, then yes, because then and this happened in a project I did with the World Bank that's not related to We Robotics in Vanuatu, which is an island close to New Zealand, after a major cyclone there, really Category 5 cyclone. And we were collecting all this imagery of the damage, and we had to upload the imagery to get it to the cloud so that then the World Bank people in Washington, D.C. could start analyzing. And because the bandwidth and the reliability of the internet connection was so bad, it took us days literally. It took us days just to upload the imagery. And that means the whole assessment response efforts were delayed by days. And so in some cases, it can be incredibly, incredibly problematic. Now, there are, of course, solutions. If you have the budget, you could use sat phones, you could use satellite communication, but that's going to cost a lot of money. So what we want to do with our flying labs is to have the analysis be done locally, so that you don't need to actually upload the imagery to anywhere. You do the analysis locally, and then you share the results, because ultimately the humanitarians and the development experts, frankly, they don't want more pictures. They don't have the time to look at pictures. They want answers to their questions. And so what we want to do is localize the analysis of this imagery without needing, internet connection, and then have the labs provide those concrete answers to the questions that development and aid organizations need.
Okay, there is Colin that has an invitation for you. I will be looking forward to establish Ghana Flying Labs with your help.
I'm really glad you brought this up. I was just having a phone call yesterday with a colleague who is looking to do some work with drones in Ghana. And again, today, actually an Italian colleague of mine mentioned Ghana as potentially an area where we might do some work. So please get in touch with me. Feel free to email me at any time, just patrick@werobotics. The only challenge that I've heard so far with Ghana is that it can be difficult to get regulatory permission to do the flight plans. But I know it's been done already by some other colleagues. So, please get in touch if you want to explore this further. I can't promise anything, obviously, because, if it is an opportunity, then of course we have to put the funding proposal together, and that takes time, and then we have to secure the funding. But I'd be very keen to explore Ghana further.
Okay, there is another question. Is all the projects you described seem to be disaster climate related? Can drones be used on the regular basis, say, for agriculture, farming, practice improvement, or other regular development work? So if the drones could be used more in development issues or development sector?
Absolutely. I mean, the way to one of the projects we're going to be doing in Tanzania next week is an agriculture project with our Tanzania Flying Labs. And so we specifically bought a near-infrared camera that we're going to be putting on the drone so that we can really do a look at vegetation index and health and so on. So yes, as far as the development question goes, just think about drones as a way to collect data. You need to collect data for development projects as well. We've done this by paper and pen, forums, surveys. We've done this with mobile phones and tablets and so on. And we do this with satellite imagery as well. Drones are simply another technology in the toolbox that help you to collect certain types of information and data that cannot be collected in any other way. And so if your development projects require data, then sure, there may be an opportunity where the use of drones in that context will actually be time-saving, cost-saving, and help you actually accelerate the impact of your project. So there's absolutely no doubt. I mean, I know that the drones are being used, for in context of diamond mines in Guinea and West Africa, and you can learn more about this on my blog at iRevolutions. There are projects that are focused on palm tree monitoring because of infestation of beetles in the Philippines as well. There are projects happening in, I believe, in South Africa, where it's looking at informal settlements and slums and how to improve urban planning within informal settlements and in refugee camps as well. So yeah, it's just the best way. I think the answer is yes. Does your development project need data, and can drones provide you with the data that you're looking for? So yeah, I think it's what's important here is not to think about this as, oh, this is a humanitarian tool, but this is a data collection platform. And like anything other, we don't only use mobile phones for humanitarian purposes. We use it for public health. We use it for all kinds of other projects. So that's a really, really great question. It's important to not be too narrow here at all, in terms of the opportunities.
Thank you, Patrick. And going back to how difficult it is to repair a drone, we read in the internet some days ago about a paper drone. So some projects for when it's so difficult to let the drone to turn back to the base camp. So they start using this paper drone. I just wanna know if you had some experience or if you are going to test this solution or not.
Yeah, I've been following this very closely. It's not just that it's paper-based; it's that it's biodegradable, which is really, really nice. I'll share a bit more about this actually in my a story about Peru Flying Labs in just a bit in terms of low-cost, affordable solutions. So I'll say more about this in a few minutes.
Okay, thank you. I think you can go on because we answered to almost all the questions, and we will try to have another question time at the end.
Okay, certainly. So we were first in Tanzania in October of last year to start building up our Tanzania flying labs, and some of the first projects we did was with Khadija here on the left and Khairat on the right, who, by the way, are the most expert women Tanzanian drone pilots in the country. They're absolutely phenomenal, very, very skilled, and have a lot of experience. And so it was a real pleasure to work with them and to train them on the new technologies and new drones that we were bringing. And the projects we did was in northwestern Tanzania on the border with Uganda. Last year, there was last August, there was a 5.0 earthquake, which may not seem like much to us, maybe in Europe or the US or New Zealand, but it's a big, big deal in Tanzania. It's one of the largest earthquakes they've ever had in history. And so there was quite a bit of damage, and we were asked by the government to carry out aerial surveys, and we said yes, but only if we get to train our local team as well. And they said not a problem. So we worked with Khadija and Yusuf, who you see here, to carry out these aerial surveys. Yusuf is our coordinator for our Tanzania flying labs, and Khadija, Khairat are still completing their studies, but we hope that once they're finished, they'll be able to join our flying labs efforts and to collaborate with us as well. Just to reinforce again that community engagement is really, really key here. We spend a lot of our time before and during and after our projects engaging with the community, letting them know what we're doing, what this technology does. Here's Khadija speaking with some local women in the village in Zanzibar, where we were doing environmental mapping of the coastlines. We mapped Zanzibar's largest forest and so on. And Khadija is explaining how the technology works, why we're using it, how the data is going to be used, by whom, and all that. And so this kind of community awareness raising and education is not just good to have, it's indispensable. It's as far as we're concerned, it's absolutely a requirement for everything that we do. I mentioned during the questions that we're heading back tomorrow. We've got a number of projects lined up for the next 10 days, including an agriculture projects and more environmental monitoring projects, to give you a sense of different applications there as well. So we're really excited to get the chance to work with our team there again. I'll close with our work in Peru Flying Labs, which is very different. And that's a point that I just want to highlight, is because our flying labs are run locally, and our local teams decide on which projects to work on based on the challenges that exist in these different countries. Our different labs will work on different projects, and this is very true of Peru. So as you see here, this is a picture of the Amazon rainforest in Peru, and you don't see any highways, and that's because there are no highways in the Amazon. The main means, and sometimes the only means of transportation, is through these river boats that go along these very slow moving rivers. And having been there recently, I can tell you that there's a lot of debris in these rivers. There are a lot of trees, branches that have fallen in, and so even if you have a good boat, you have to zigzag. Sometimes you have to stop because the propeller has lots of weeds and plants that are trapped in it. So you have to take. So it can take a long time to go from one village to the next. But if you were to fly, that would be maybe a very different story. And that's exactly what we tried to do in December, just a couple months ago. in the Peruvian Amazon rainforest. So you see here, there's a town, a quite developed town called Contamana on the bottom right, and then a rather remote village, Pampa Hermosa, on the top left here. And you can see that actually Pampa Hermosa is not anywhere close to the river. So it takes a good, half an hour to an hour to actually walk that, depending on whether the small footpath in the rainforest is dry or not. If it's rained, then it takes even longer. There are small motorbikes that you can take, but again, you can't use them when the rains happen. So it's quite remote, it's quite distant. And if you take a riverboat or a regular canoe from Contamana to Pampa Hermosa, it can take you up to 6 hours. A regular fast public boat that takes dozens of passengers, that you can do in about 4 hours on average. But it's definitely very remote, even though by flight, as the crow flies, the distance is really only 40 kilometers. So this is just to show you some pictures of what these canoes look like. And it's, by the way, just to state the obvious, it's very hot in the Amazon rainforest, and being under the sun and traveling that much during the day, it can be really tiring. And the reason I bring this up is because this project focused on a public health initiative. So we were talking to the local doctors and the ministries of health about some of the challenges, public health challenges in the Amazon. And they mentioned to us that in the Contamana region alone, they get about 45 snake bites per month on average. And this was the clinic that we visited in Pampa Hermosa. And we had just learned from the local doctor on the left here. The doctor on the right, Dr. Zucchetti, is with the Ministry of Health. But the other doctor was the local doctor there, and he had told us that just last week, before we had arrived, there had been a snake bite victim that he had to treat, and he had only one packet of anti-venom left that hadn't been restocked. So if there were going to be 2 bites in the next 2 days, he would only be able to treat one person. And of course, snakes are not always very nice, especially in the Amazon, and certainly can be anti-venoms can very much be life-saving, which is why the local doctor in this local clinic has to have anti-venom. But if you don't have any, and it takes you 6 hours to go to Contamana or to get a anti-venom from Contamana, 6 hours is a very long time after you've been bitten by a snake, and it's not clear that you would necessarily be still alive or in what condition you would be 6 hours later. And so this is just an example of what the anti-venom package looks like. It's a liquid that has to be refrigerated and when it's transported as well. So that adds another challenge. So again, just to reinforce, the community engagement process, that's really important to us. We spent a long time with this local community radio station in Contamana to explain what we were doing, what the technology was about, and answering all the questions that people had and our host had about the technology. And that's really, really key. Now, just to make the story more interesting here, we had actually brought a very expensive, let me say, relatively expensive drone, a professional cargo drone that you see here in the 2 boxes. So it's quite a big drone, and it cost about $40,000 US. Now, we had decided to field test this drone and to invite the company that manufactures this drone to the Amazon rainforest to field test it with us. And the reason we did this is because they had been quite successful in other flights earlier that summer. So they had there was some good success stories, and they were supported by some important donors, and we figured, okay, this is a really, really strong platform, and it can carry 2 kilos, 60 kilometers. So let's use that platform. Unfortunately, it didn't work. After 3 days of trying, the company tried everything. They were trying to fix it, repair it, troubleshoot it for 3 consecutive days, 10 hours every day to try and fix it. And at the end, it could only fly for 30 seconds before it became quite unstable. So that was really, really, really depressing. We had worked for half a year to set up this project. We had spent so much time and effort and funding to make this project happen. So it was a bit of it was very, very depressing. Now, thankfully, our Peru Flying Labs team had brought this other drone with them, just honestly almost by accident, because this is a mapping drone, and we weren't going to do any mapping. We're not mapping the rainforest. We're carrying cargo. So they just brought it, just to say, oh, whatever, we'll just bring it just in case. And so what our team in Peru said is, listen, we have nothing to lose. Why don't we try and use this drone? And we remove the camera, and instead we put the anti-venom where the camera is supposed to be. And so that's exactly what we tried to do. And I should say, have a close look at this drone. There's a reason why our Peruvian friends call this drone Frankie after Frankenstein. It is held together by duct tape and rubber bands. It is beaten up, it's battered, it's been in many, many fights, it seems like. It's been injured several times. And so, a very, very different kind of drone. And it only costs a few thousand, exactly $2,799 compared to $40,000. And so we figured, okay, well, we have nothing to lose. This has never been done before. We've never flown Frankie 40 kilometers. We've never had Frankie transport anything but a camera. We have no idea if this is going to work at all. But our Peruvian team decided to go for it. Just so you know, this is what the drone actually looks like when it's new. It is not a DIY jerry-rigged drone. It's actually a professional, commercially available drone called the E834, Event E384. And it's available. It's been used and certified in the US by the aviation authorities. It's been used in dozens of countries around the world. So it's not a toy. It's not something that was built in a garage yesterday. It's still a professional platform. So our team that morning decided to start preparing for the flights. It should be clear by now that we had no plans to use Frankie. We were totally not prepared. This was completely ad hoc and completely improvised. But they started testing and programming the flights so that Frankie would know where to fly to Pampa Hermosa. And meanwhile, oops, that's loud. Meanwhile, we took the riverboat to Pampa Hermosa. Now you see here, this is not a regular riverboat. This is actually, we were very lucky that the Peruvian Navy allowed us to use their riverboat, which is the fastest boat in the Amazon. But it's not something you can take for public health purposes or for public transportation. But we were very lucky that they allowed us to do that, because otherwise we would still be there taking the slow boats back and forth. In any event, once we got to Pampa Hermosa, the local villagers came out. Everybody was very excited to witness the very first drone delivery in the Amazon rainforest, the very first time a drone would ever land in their village. And in the process, the local doctor decided to simulate a snake bite. So they wanted to not just receive the drone and take the anti-venom out and say, okay, great, applaud. They really wanted to go through the motions, to go through the whole process as if there was a real snake bite, just to really get a sense of how it might all work. And so we had a teenager from the village who very kindly volunteered to be the snake bite victim. Here's Frankie being launched. As you see, it's very light. It's hand launched, and it can carry about half a kilo of payload. And again, when I got the message by SMS that the drone had taken off and I was in Pampa Hermosa, we had no idea how long it might take. It could take half an hour, 45 minutes. We didn't really know, depending on how much wind there might be in between the places. But I have to be very honest, we were very stressed and anxious, because obviously the first drone had not worked after all this effort, and so there was a lot of pressure. And after 30 minutes went by, we still didn't have any sign of the drone. But right after that, like around 36 minutes, finally the villagers started shouting and saying, "Oh, there's a drone! There's a drone!" So we really lucked out. I think there was some luck involved here, and you can see the team removing the cold pack because we put the antivenom in the refrigerated pack to keep it cool. And then it was used by the local doctor and the nurses to administer the antivenom, to the fake snakebite victim. So that was a really great story. And so, this was late afternoon when the drone landed, and we figured, okay, well, what if we sent the drone back? I mean, we don't need to keep it here. So why don't we send the drone back? We were successful once. Maybe we might be lucky a second time. And so we talked to the doctors again and said, what else do you need to deliver and to transport? And they said, well, with diagnosis that we do, sometimes we can't diagnose what a patient has when they come to the clinic. And that means sometimes we have to send the patient on a canoe to Contamana, or we have to take a blood sample and send the blood sample to Contamana so it can get tested there, so that we know what it is that the patient has. And that, it would be amazing and completely unprecedented if we could actually fly this blood sample instead into just 35. I could take the blood sample, take the blood from the patient, put it in the drone, fly it for 35 minutes, and then the clinic in hospital in Contamana would then be able to test it in within an hour or two, tell me what the problem is, so that I know what medication to use. So that's when it's really helpful to have a chief technology officer that you can volunteer. This is Adam, the CTO of Robotics, who I volunteered for the blood sample, which we then put into the cold pack together with the antivenom and the refrigerated ice pack there, and then put back into Frankie. And now we were flying at night, and it's very dark in the Amazon rainforest, obviously. And so we needed to put a light on Frankie. And so the only thing we found in the village was a bike light. And so the bicycle light. So we took that and we took some tape and we taped the bicycle light to Frankie's nose. And then we threw Frankie into the dark. This is a video. It's just, you just see the bit of the light that Frankie had, and it just vanished in the dark. And again, we had no idea whether this would work. We just had no preparation time. Nothing like this had been done before with this drone. So we really had no idea. Now over in Contamana, the local community had come together to help us light up the football field. So here's when some of the first motorbike drivers arrived and put their their headlights on, so that we could have some light to actually see where Frankie was programmed to fly. Unfortunately, Frankie had a different idea and ended up landing on this tree here, just outside the football field. Now, this is not Frankie's fault. What we found out happened was we gave Frankie the wrong coordinates, the wrong GPS coordinates for the football field. Because when we took the GPS coordinates using Google Maps, and so this is a good lesson, don't use Google Maps when you need precise GPS coordinates for the Amazon rainforest. It was not accurate. So the Google Maps coordinates were not accurate, so we fed Frankie the wrong coordinates, and Frankie landed here, which is where the coordinates were, and happened to be not the football field. But the good news is that the drone was basically not damaged. There's only one small piece, a servo, that only costs $3,000 that you need to replace, and those are available locally in Peru. And the payload, the vaccine, the antivenom, the blood sample, the ice pack was completely intact. We brought this back. Dr. Giovanna, that you see here, who is one of our champions, a local doctor in Contamana, explaining to the local community what worked and the successes and so on. And that's also, again, really important. It's not just about doing community engagement and during the project. It's equally important to then engage with the local community again after the project, to share what happened, what worked, and what didn't work. So it's a great story, but it's important not to get too excited either, because these were just 2 flights, and it was just 40 kilometers, and it was just half a kilo. And you know what? It rains in the Amazon rainforest, and so if there were really heavy rains, Frankie would not have been possible to fly. So it's not about which drone is inherently better. It's really about which drone is best for the circumstances, for the problems you're trying to solve, for the partners and communities you're working with, and for the budgetary constraints that you might have. And I just want to share one more bit about Peru. that's not public yet, but just on Sunday, our Peru Flying Labs team went back to Contamana and did a 75-kilometer flight. So we almost doubled it from 40 kilometers to 75 kilometers and successfully delivered a saline solution at the request of the doctors there. So that's a really great success story. It's not always successful. There are always failures and setbacks in the projects and the work that we do in the humanitarian technology and the ICT for development space. And that's just the nature of it and the nature of innovation. In any event, this was a big team effort, really required a lot of collaboration with many different partners and colleagues. And I'll just end by saying that, you know, at We Robotics, we're really interested in robotics. When, you know, and drones are only one field of robotics. Drones are aerial robotics. But like I might have suggested earlier, what's really key here is that these platforms, whether they fly, whether they drive, and whether they swim, what's exciting about them is that you can program them. You can make them work autonomously, independently, without having to always do everything manually. And so we're really keen to work with other types of robotics. We're hoping that by this summer, by the end of the year, we'll be able to do some projects using marine or aquatic robotics, swimming robots in Tanzania with our flying labs there. We're also hoping to do some projects in Nepal with marine robotics in the Himalayan, in the glacial lakes of the Himalaya. We already have the whole project set up. We just need the funding. So we're just doing some fundraising on that. And then finally, you know, driving ground terrestrial robotics, I think in the years to come, we'll have an interesting role to play in humanitarian and development projects as well. I think it's still early days for ground robotics in terms of the technology, in terms of the cost. But I think ultimately, inevitably, in the years to come, you know, we're going to see the use of flying, driving, and swimming robots across a range of humanitarian and development projects. So I'll just end with that and very much welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you so much, Patrick. Yes, we have many questions. We have one from Cleopa. Do you know of any training or and certification in Africa other than South Africa? I'm Cleopa from Kenya, where legislation on drones just got approved and quite excited about it right now. So yes, we had this news from Kenya. So she want to know about training and certification.
That's great. I grew up in Kenya, so I spent most of my childhood in Kenya, East Africa. So it's got a very close to my heart. We had tried to do some projects with drones 2 years ago, but as you say, the Ministry of Defense in Kenya said absolutely not, nothing, for no reason, no drones, which was really unfortunate because there were some really compelling health projects that we were hoping to do in Kisumu, around Kisumu. But anyway, so the good news is, yes, the regulations have passed. I don't know. I have to review the regulations. I know they came out and it's on one of our websites, but I don't know whether Kenya itself will be providing certification. What we're doing with our flying labs is we're providing our own certification to to participants, to trainees, and so on. And we're taking a regional approach. So I was just in Uganda a few weeks ago, where I met with a number of Ugandan colleagues who are also interested in getting trained. And I said, listen, we're taking a regional approach with our flying labs, and we look at you know, until we have more funding to do our flying labs in Uganda, in Tanzania, and Rwanda, and so on. We're using the Tanzania flying labs as a regional flying labs. And so the trainings that we're going to be conducting in Tanzania are open to others from East Africa. So you know, I guess maybe the next couple of days is too short notice to join us for the training. But if you get in touch with me, I can let you know. We don't have a schedule yet for the next trainings after Tanzania, because of course we're doing that in the next few days now. But potentially late summer, maybe early fall, there might be another training, and you know, everyone is absolutely invited to join these trainings.
Okay, there is a Valentine that adds some information on this topic. The development CAFE, I don't know what is it, provides training and certification in drones for development. It's based both in Nairobi and Bali.
Wow, I have to write that down. Yeah.
I think it could be good information for all the others from Kenya. And I have another question from Richard.
Repeat the name of the organization again, please.
As CAFE. And there is also an email address. I can just copy and paste it later for you.
Okay.
Or to you, or otherwise I can give you now. Okay. You are able to read it in the chat.
Later, I mean, no problem.
Okay, and I have another question from Richard. Hi, Patrick, please, can you give examples of affordable apps for imaginary analysis?
Yes. If you can use Drone Deploy. That's free. Now you can pay for a faster processing, but often that's not necessarily really needed. But Drone Deploy is a web-based platform that's free to use. There's another platform called Open Drone Map, which is free and open source, but it's still being developed. And I haven't checked the latest user interface. I know when I looked at it about a year ago, it was still not the most user-friendly and more geared towards users who have a software development background. But have a look at Open Drone Map. That could potentially be an opportunity. And otherwise, just if you Google Drone Deploy, you can see Drone Deploy helps you. You can plan your flights and process the imagery all for free.
Okay, thank you. And there is from Nigeria, Kike Obi. I'm not sure that I read the name in a correctly way. Just a second. I will try to open your microphone as you asked me. I just have to find you in the big list of all the people attending. Sorry. Okay. I'll go on with another question and then I switch on the microphone. About Italy. Last year we had the earthquake. Is there any Italian flying labs? It's Walter asking you.
That's a good question. There isn't. Our work is primarily in developing countries rather than in Europe and the US. But we always get questions about doing a flying labs in the US or Canada or Europe or New Zealand or Australia, and that's not where we work. But if you're interested in potentially doing a self organized flying labs in your country, in your town or city, then certainly get in touch. We can share with you our framework around our flying labs that we use. We've shared this with our colleagues in Chile, who are experimenting, because nobody's done this before, but they're experimenting with setting up their own self-organized Santiago, Chile flying labs. And so we're certainly open to this idea. It's almost like a TEDx, if you'd like, approach, and we love the idea of making this scalable and democratizing it and so on, and letting 1,000 flowers bloom. So again, feel free to get in touch. Just to say that it is hard work. It's not automatic. But if you're passionate and committed and you have the time and so on, then you can see what our colleagues in Chile have done. They've been really, really active, and it's been great to see.
Okay, I'm gonna switch on the microphone. I'm not sure. I cannot see your microphone connected, so maybe you can just write me in the chat answer to the question just to tell me if you really have a microphone or not, because I cannot see your microphone. Okay, now it's fine. Go ahead. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, Patrick. How are you?
I'm doing all right. A little tired, but how are you?
I'm fine. I'm good. Impressed with your work, Patrick. I wish we could have more people like you help change the sphere of use applications of UAVs, especially in the humanitarian sector. Here in Nigeria, we're actually stuck with lots of government regulations not being clear. And hopefully, I know there will be changes coming up, and we could actually use your presence in helping us shape a future here for us here in Nigeria, and help the government see the usefulness and useful applications of UAVs. I'll write to you. I wouldn't take much of your time. I'll write to you. I'll give you a frame, a sketchup of what I have in mind, and we'll see if we can work together, especially towards the flying labs.
That would be phenomenal. Thank you so much as well for your kind words. You know, it's definitely not a one-person show. Huh? We Robotics. It's a really, really big team effort, and the real heroes are the flying labs teams. Our Tanzanian friends and Nepali friends and Peruvian friends. They are the ones who are there and really working so hard. I mean, they're the ones who are inspiring us, and it's just really great. It's been a real treat, and I'd love to explore opportunities in Nigeria. And you know, unfortunately, this is not unique. The regulatory challenges. You know, it took us 6 months. It took us half a year to get permissions in Nepal. Huh? Half a freaking year. So it's a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of time. Like you said, meeting with the government, meeting with the different officials, and educating them, because we can't also expect that they're going to be the drone experts. We can't expect them to know all the incredible projects that are happening around the world. That's not what they do in the government. They have other obligations and responsibilities and areas of expertise. So it really is our collective responsibility to help educate the regulators, to help educate the government, to show them that this can be done safely, responsibly, effectively, and not only that it can be done, but that it has already been done safely, effectively, and responsibly in dozens of countries around the world, including some of the other neighboring countries in Africa, right? Because then that makes it more difficult for them to come up with other excuses. And so I have spent a lot of time doing exactly what you've described, meeting with government officials, with different organizations, with regulators, and sharing with them that this is not science fiction, that this is not dangerous, that it has been done safely, responsibly, and that ultimately this can make them look good. You know, when I was negotiating with the Aviation Authority in Peru last February in 2016, I told them, I said, listen, look at all these other countries that are doing these projects, you know, from the Philippines to Nepal to Rwanda to Namibia to Chile. Like, all of the other people are doing it. What's wrong with Peru? You guys have universities, you're educated, you have passion, you're entrepreneurial, you're hardworking. There's no excuse. You know, if the Filipinos are doing it, if the Rwandans are doing it, if the Chileans are doing it, if the Haitians are doing it, what are you waiting for? You know, so you have to be diplomatic, huh? But that seemed to work. I did it in a very diplomatic and gentle way. I just said, you know, how can we help you? Because all the other countries are doing it. What is it? What do you need for this to work in your country? And by the way, what we're doing with the Flying Labs is we're helping to create local jobs. And which politician does not want to be recognized for creating local jobs, especially in the high-tech sector, right? So. Anyways, I know it's a huge challenge and it's not automatic and it may take months or years still in Nigeria and other countries, but I really welcome the challenge and I would love to team up with you and see, you know, what we can do in Nigeria.
Thank you very much, Patrick.
Thank you. Okay, I go ahead with other questions. We have Sophie that is asking, in how many countries we can find flying labs, and any places in Central Asia and Europe?
That's a great question. So right now, so we have our first grant from the Rockefeller Foundation that we received last year was a startup grant to launch our first 3 flying labs, and we, after months of scoping, research, and so on, we ended up choosing 1 each from Asia, Africa, and Latin America. So the ones you've heard about here, the Nepal, Tanzania, and Peru. But there's a lot of interest to do a number of other labs. And so we've done some scoping in the Philippines. We have we have some strong buy-in from the aviation authority there and from government. So we've submitted a grant literally 10 months ago, and we're waiting for the response. We were in the Maldives at the request of the United Nations Development Program, UNDP, last month. This was the second time in 6 months that we were in the Maldives, so exploring the needs for and opportunities for flying labs in the Maldives. And of course, they're focusing on climate change, sea level rise, waste management, and so on. And that was very positive. In fact, later today, there'll be a blog post on We Robotics on our most recent scoping and field work there in the Maldives. And we're going to be in Panama in a couple of weeks to also scope the opportunity there for flying labs in Panama. We also have had an invitation from some partners in Senegal to potentially explore the possibility of a flying labs. And we've talked to some colleagues in Ghana, as well as the Central African Republic, for some potential flying labs there. So we're scoping. We haven't looked into to sort of Europe, Central Europe, again because we tend to focus more on developing countries in general. But yeah, that's hopefully that answers your question. I would just say that the biggest challenge, I think the demand is there. I think I mean, there's going to be a couple times where we've had a group approach us and they say, oh, we want to do this with drones, we want to flying labs, and we basically told them it doesn't make sense to use drones. It's much easier, and in your particular case, better to use satellite imagery or mobile phones or what have you. But for the most part, we're surprised, pleasantly surprised, that we thought we were going to have to do a lot of outreach to explore flying labs, but most of the contacts we have are people who get in touch with us or who are referred to us. The biggest challenge, I think, for me is besides the regulatory permissions and so on, is just a fundraising. It's a fundraising, but that's nothing new in the development NGO space. We know how to build successful flying labs. We know how to do it well, but of course, we need to be able to hire the Tanzanian team to coordinate the flying labs. We need to be able to provide them with the training. We need to be able to provide them with the technology, and that's unfortunately, we don't get this technology always for free, and it takes money. So, but this is just to say, if any of you are passionate about exploring this further, please do get in touch with me, and let's see if we can put together some funding proposals. If we can find some really compelling use cases, if there's a really good story or a number of really good stories that you can tell to anyone, and anybody who hears it says, of course you need a flying labs for this, it really has to be compelling, really has to make sense. But I'd welcome the opportunity to explore this further.
Okay, I have another question from Benjamin. Have you had to use drones in conflict zones before? And how do you deal with the issue of security?
Very good question. So before We Robotics, we had launched something called the Humanitarian UAV Network. So you can Google Humanitarian UAV Network, it's uaviators.org. And as part of this, something I set up this is a network I set up in 2013. One of the first things I did was start developing a code of conduct to inform the responsible, ethical use of drones in a wide range of humanitarian settings. And this code of conduct, which is available on the website of the Humanitarian UAV Network, and you can also find it through our We Robotics website. It has been revised by dozens of humanitarian organizations, including the International Committee of the Red Cross, UN OCHA, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, UNHCR, the World Food Program, you name it. And is now a lot better than the first draft I wrote 3 years ago. So I invite you to look at that. It doesn't mean it's perfect, but it's been really endorsed now by many international organizations and donors. It can still be improved. So again, I appreciate the feedback. But just to say, based on the question that was just posed, one of the code of conduct includes five thematic areas and guidelines for 5 thematic areas. One of those 5 areas is specifically on the use of drones in conflict zones, so conflict sensitivity. And that section, those set of guidelines, was primarily written by the International Committee of the Red Cross and the American Red Cross. Obviously, the ICRC has extensive experience in working in conflict zones and understands conflict sensitivity and data protection protocols and the need for data security as well. And so I'll invite you to review those guidelines. You know, as you'll note from reading this code of conduct and those guidelines, the position that we take is that we discourage the use of drones in conflict zones, but we also recognize that people will do whatever they want. And so we decided that since people are going to do whatever they want, we might as well educate them and provide them with some guidelines and issues to think very carefully about before or when they start using drones in conflict zones, because obviously it does present a number of serious challenges and risks that are not as extensive when you operate these platforms in non-conflict environments. So hopefully that answers the question. Hello, hello.
Sorry, I'm late. I'm tired a little bit also. You can see the results. Okay, there is Andrea that is writing, that is asking us to write down the name of other free program for the drone image processing. So maybe you can just send it to me and I will include it in a newsletter or something, if it's fine for you.
Oh, absolutely. You can also go to the Humanitarian UAV Network website and the documents section. It's all free, it's public. The documents section, you will find the code of conduct, the checklist, and there's one document there that is a list of free and open source software for drones.
Okay, could you repeat the name of the website?
So if you just have to Google Humanitarian UAV Network, and then you'll see it's in the documents section, and then you can share that link, or anybody here obviously on the call can check the link for themselves.
And they are also asking about the professional profile you are looking at, for example, in We Robotics, or what are the professional profiles you are looking for working in this sector? Only people like coders or engineer, or is it open also to other professional profiles?
Well, so I mean, ultimately, you know, our vision with our flying labs is to have, you know, dozens of people, you know, working locally and directing and guiding and operating these flying labs, rather than, you know, 2 or 3, which is right now what we have because of just the initial limited funding to begin with. And so as we are able to expand as funding becomes available, then absolutely we're going to need a range of expertise to be able to run successfully a really effective and impactful flying labs, right? So there's going to be a need for coordination needs, business operations management, fundraising, communications, strategic communications. I mean, just everything you need to like run an organization, really, right? So the set of and engineers, obviously engineers, are going to be really key. So you know, that's the vision. That's the goal. Right now, it's a smaller team because we're just getting started in Peru, Tanzania, and Nepal. And you can find out more about the coordinators and their bios on our website, on the We Robotics website, the team section. We've listed the coordinators. Now we also have interns and other staff that are part-time at the flying labs, and we're going to be listing them soon as well. But at least with the coordinators, you get a sense of you know, what we're looking for in terms of coordinators. I would say, just to say that of course certain skills and areas of expertise are important. For me, the most important is passion and just you know, the hard work. But it's not hard work if you're passionate. It's a joy if you're passionate. It doesn't mean it's not tiring and exhausting, but we're really looking for people who are passionate and who are proactive, independent, self-motivated, and who know how to take the initiative without, you know, asking for instructions. That's just us.
Thank you so much, Patrick. I think we can really we really got the feeling of all the passion that you are putting in your daily job. And we are receiving a lot of compliments and congratulations to you for the webinar and all the information. So and I really want to thank you for being here. It was a very great honor for us to you accepting our invitation. I really hope we can keep in touch in the next months and to have other opportunities to talk about this this topic and also others, open more on all the digital humanitarians. Is not only drones, but it's more of this. So I think we are really in time. So I thank you once more. And I thank you all the participants and my colleague Erika Rossi that follow everything, especially the Twitter account. So see you next time. I just want to say to the participants, you will get the video recordings, I think tomorrow in the afternoon, Italian time. Otherwise, I will send you a newsletter with the recordings and all the information you need. So thank you so much, Patrick.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining, and really your questions were phenomenal. They made me think, they made me brainstorm with you, and it's really why I enjoy doing these webinars so much, is I get to learn and think hard, and it's a real treat. So thanks so much for having me again, and all the very best with your future webinars.
Thank you so much.